Hi friends, happy Monday. Welcome back to my channel. So today I thought that we would just have a little rambly reseller chat. I know that the title is a tiny bit clickbaity, but I do think that reselling includes some very hard truths in it. And also I was making fun of myself a little because I'm going makeup free today, but don't do that to yourself. Be nice to yourself. Do as I say, not as I do. Anyway, um, one of the first things I thought I would talk about today was I got a return, which I kind of told y'all I was going to be getting. I suspected I was going to be getting. Somebody wanted to open a return, but like hadn't really taken any steps towards it. Well, they returned the item today and it came back to me in this. This is the bag that I send the item in within another bag. It even still had my business card taped to it, which also like hats off to USPS because they handled the package carefully enough that this business card did not come off. But also, how do you ship something back in a clear plastic bag? And it was like $100 item. Like I was a little bit horrified and mad. The item was not damaged. And it was only coming from like one state away. It wasn't a huge deal, but and I get that like sometimes individual consumers, they don't have like a desk full of shipping supplies the way that I do, but I cannot imagine that I would have sent something back in a clear plastic bag. A, because I'd be paranoid, it would be ruined forever. And so the bag that I sent it off in, it's like it had like a plastic strip and then you stick it down and it's not the stickiest thing, right? So it's not great to begin with. So they use the same bag. Thankfully, I get nice thick ones. But it was like folded over and then closed with the shipping label to tape it closed. It was ridiculous. It was so crazy. I can't believe it got here without a problem, but it did. Thank goodness. But also like package theft is so rampant and people talk about it all the time. And maybe those are just people in my circles because again, reseller. So I'm always hearing about people's packaging, whatever. But like, hello. Oh my God. Anyway, it got here safe and sound. Nobody stole it. It wasn't damaged. All is good. In fact, this is it right here. I've already relisted it. I raised the price when I relisted it because I did. So anyway, that's that. Item number one. Messy little reseller topic number two is Poshmark. I know that we kind of touched on Poshmark the other day, but my God. So here's the thing with Poshmark. Poshmark rolled out some changes and they're a hot fucking mess. Okay, so that's side number one of it. But side number two is that the reseller response to A, to the changes, and B, to the hot fucking mess is a whole separate mess on its own. So I don't want to get like deep into the Poshmark shit because it's tedious, but Poshmark, you have to like do all this sharing. And then people also constantly are like taking items down and then relisting them as though it's a new item. And that's a common reseller tactic for all the platforms. And Poshmark rolled out a thing saying that you cannot have quote unquote excessive delist, relist practices, but they didn't define what excessive was. And so is it number of times per day? Is it number of items? Is it, number of items per day in comparison to how many items are in your closet, like a ratio or percentage? What was it, right? And so after a lot of hullabaloo, am I like 98? Where did that word come from? After a whole lot of fucking uproar from the resellers, Poshmark came out and said, okay, you just have to do it. Like the item has to be listed for at least 60 days before you can delist it and relist it again. They didn't say anything about how many items you can do that with, how many per day, whatever, right? There's no limit on the number, just has to be listed for 60 days. But in the meantime, people were getting warnings and suspensions for having delisted one item without relisting it at all. So like clearly Poshmark was having some bots that were problematic, right? They're whatever they're doing to determine that you are engaging in this problematic behavior was glitching the fuck out, and people were having their entire closet shut down. That's not true. Here I am, part of the problem. They would delist one item or two items because they sold them somewhere else on eBay or whatever. And then Poshmark, if they would delist the one item, Poshmark would issue them a warning email. But the problem is that some of these resellers were like going in and delisting like 3 or 4 items at a time because it's like, oh, these things sold, let me go take them down, right? They were sitting down and doing their little work. So they would delist one item, Poshmark would send them a warning email, but they of course hadn't seen it yet because they're in the process of delisting like 3, 4 items. They would delist the second item and Poshmark would suspend them from being able to list new items for 6 days. So crazy town, right? Then I know that there was like some people were getting a 7-day suspension, and I don't know if that was just a listing suspension or if their closet was suspended altogether, like their whole account was suspended. But like it was nuts. Like it was clearly Poshmark was like suspending people for doing something that people were not actually doing, right? So it's a mess. Poshmark has a giant glitch. They need to figure their shit out. They're probably using some sort of fucking AI bullshit. Don't get me started on that. But now in the meantime, all these people over here are like, oh, Poshmark doesn't want us to make sales. Poshmark hates us. Poshmark, is, suspending me. Like nobody's really, they're all responding to the suspensions. Understandable. But they're responding to it as though it's not a glitch, like that this is a purposeful thing that I can't believe Poshmark would suspend me just for delisting an item that sold. I guess I can't delist sold items anymore. It's like, what are y'all doing? Like clearly this is an error, right? Like it doesn't make sense in any way, because if Poshmark didn't want you selling on other platforms, they would say, if you're delisting items, period, right? If you're deleting them from your closet, if you're taking them down off of Poshmark, we're going to have a problem with that, which doesn't even make any sense for them to say that even, right? But people are interpreting these actions in all sorts of crazy ways. So there's just been uproar and it's been nuts. And, I, knock on wood, have not experienced any problems, but also that's kind of because I haven't really made any sales. And I know I talked about this too. Someone had a theory that the people, because other people were like not getting suspended, they were able to delist items with no problem, right? So someone had a theory that if you had been using one of these Poshmark bot services, there's like, I don't know them all because I didn't use them, but I know there's Posher VA. There's other ones. That's the only one I can think of. I don't know if List Perfectly did those types of Poshmark bot services. I know that there was another like sort of Poshmark virtual assistant type of service as well. Someone's theory was that if you were already using one of those services, those were the sellers that were being sort of targeted, so to speak, in this glitch. Those were the sellers being hit by this glitch. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It kind of makes sense to me. I was not ever using any kind of bot service for Poshmark, and I wasn't doing the whole delist relist thing on Poshmark yet because I just started selling on there again recently. So all of the items I was listing on Poshmark were, in my opinion, too new for me to take down. But I also don't engage in that a whole lot anyway. I've never really done the whole delist relist thing in the first place. Like once I list something, it's just up and that's it. But now that I use Vendoo and I'm doing all this cross posting, my benchmark for when to like delist something and then relist it again is when it expires on Etsy, which Etsy also was glitching for a long time and my things were not expiring, but they are now. They're all expiring. It's so much fun, which will lead me into my next reseller nightmare, but we'll get there. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. Like I've been using Vendoo. Vendoo just rolled out a sharing service and it's in a beta mode, right? It's in beta. So I don't think all sellers even have access to it yet. I do have access to it. It allows you to share your Poshmark closet, and it also allows you to like bump your Depop listings. It also works for Grailed, and I don't know what else because I don't use them. But I have used it for Depop. I have not noticed any fucking difference. And I have used it for Poshmark. For me, Poshmark also has like a share your closet feature from the app. So, and I've used that before. I don't really notice the difference between the Vendoo version and the Poshmark version. So it doesn't much matter to me. But I will say this, the Poshmark version, it's so weird. So when I'm in my Posh closet and I go to like share everything, number one, I have to specifically filter it down to available items only. Why would I want you to share my sold items, you fucking assholes? you know? So I have to filter down to just available. And then my Posh Closet, it only loads like 40 available items at a time. So I have to manually scroll through so that it can refresh. And then I get down to like however many I have. And right now, my Posh Closet is only like 325 items. So it's like tedious, but it's like manageable. Whereas if I just do it through Vendu, I don't have to do all of that, you know? So whatever. I am sure this is a service that Vendu will charge for at some point in the future. They currently are not charging for it. It's a free service, as is the like send offers feature through Vendu. So I don't know. I haven't used the bots. This is like my first little dipping my toe into any kind of bot service. I'm not on board with the whole sharing your closet all the time shit. Like that aggravates me. That's why I stopped selling on Poshmark in the first place, because the level of engagement they wanted you to engage in on a regular basis was like crazy. And it's like, I don't have fucking time for this, especially not with a 20% fee. And like the sales are just so much lower than they are on my other platforms dollar wise. Like what somebody is willing to pay on Poshmark versus what they're willing to pay on Etsy or eBay, it's too low on Poshmark. And I wasn't getting that many sales anyway, probably because I wasn't willing to like send out 50% off offers all the time. So I don't do all that bot service. I'm not going to. If at some point Vendu, I'm sure they will make this a paid service. I would utilize it if it was in some sort of like all-inclusive package that just kind of made sense, you know? But I'm not paying a whole bunch of money to share fucking Poshmark closets and stuff. And like I said with Depop, I haven't noticed that it made a difference. Depop used to also really be heavy on the sharing aspect. So not, sharing isn't the right word for Depop. You basically had to go in and like edit your item so that it would kind of refresh it and bump it to the top. They just wanted you to show that you're active in the app essentially. And again, all of these little things are showing active users in the app. If I don't have to go in and like edit my 800 items all the fucking time, then I may not spend as much time on Depop, and they're trying to like show like, oh, look at all the active users we have on here. But it's like false activity in my opinion. You know, it's bullshit. So anyway, I wasn't doing any of that on Depop. And now that I've been using Vendu and using it to kind of like refresh those listings for me, it has not resulted in any fucking, not a single solitary sale at all. So I don't feel like it matters a whole lot. To me, platforms like Depop and Poshmark work really well if that is your primary platform. If you are in there listing shit constantly, they can perform well for you. But I obviously don't consider myself a casual seller, but I'm not listing like 10, 15 items a day. Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so moving on from that, Etsy expiration stuff. So we know I've been talking about Etsy expirations for 8 million years because for the longest time I was experiencing a glitch and my things were not expiring. Yay for me, right? So I didn't have to pay this 20-cent renewal fee every 4 months on Etsy. But back in September, I went on vacation, put my whole shop on vacation mode. And when I took it off of vacation mode, out of my, I don't know, 700 and something items, 600 of them all expired. And I think it was triggered by the fact that I put my shop in vacation mode. And so when I reopened my shop, there was only 120 active items. And I was like, are you kidding me? So I was trying to stagger the reactivation of them, but I just felt like it hurts me when my shop was so small. You know, I now had 120 active items instead of 720. And so I did a couple where I was like reactivating 5, 10 per day, but I just didn't want my shop sitting at that small of a number of active items for that long of a period of time. So I just kind of bulk renewed everything, which, you know, I forget how much it costs, like $120 total for all of those things, something like that. So that sucked. But now what sucks also is that I have this mass number of items expiring in the end of May. May 21st and May 25th are like huge numbers of items on Etsy that are going to be expiring for me. So that sucks. But they have been just sort of expiring out every day now. So when things expire on Etsy, I then go into Vendu, I delist them from all the platforms, and then some of them I tweak, some of them I don't. I'm more prone to tweak them if they are more expensive items. If they're lower dollar items, I'm like, I'm not spending all of this time because it's very tedious. I basically go through and maybe I'll alter the title a little bit. I don't mess too much with the description. I'll mess around with some keywords, something like that. On, Etsy has the keywords field. eBay has like a theme drop down where you can put a whole bunch of like 70s, 80s, disco, bohemian, all that kind of stuff. Depop has like 5 hashtags. Poshmark has 3. Most of these things for me have not been active on Poshmark, so I'm taking that opportunity to list them on Poshmark. But yeah, if it's like a $40 item, I'm not messing with it too much. If it's more expensive, I'll put a little more time into it. Sometimes I think that by tweaking it, maybe it's, I don't know if the platforms sort of recognize that this is exactly the same title, photos, and item description that a different item in her shop had, like, I don't know if they're that savvy yet. I wouldn't be surprised if they are. So I do try to tweak a little bit. But again, this is such a normal behavior. I think these platforms, even if they were recognizing that difference, they discount it because so many sellers do this so frequently. So for me, I'm kind of going to be doing it every like 4 months, but a lot of people do it every 2 months or even sooner. Some people apparently are doing them like once a month, once a week, like really big resellers, meaning people who have like 1,500 items in their Poshmark closet and stuff. Those people were doing it very frequently, apparently, which is part of the reason Poshmark put this rule in place. They feel like the platform is being flooded with the same stuff over and over again, so that things that are legitimately being listed as new items are not getting seen because all these like, big kid resellers, I call them. They're, I call them big kid resellers, but they're more like, just corporate resellers. I don't know. That's not the right word either, but it's not like, me sitting here in my apartment, you know what I mean? Like there's like smaller companies with teams of people and stuff like that. So anyway, people are doing it very frequently. Poshmark recommends 60 days. When I've followed some advice about Etsy stuff, I've talked about them before. Star Glamour is a YouTube channel that I watch a lot, and they talk about Etsy SEO frequently. And they kind of float this like 90-day number, not to delist and relist, but more like that when you list a new item, it can take Etsy like 2 or 3 months to kind of figure out your placement in their search algorithm. They will give it a little bit of a boost so they can try and get more eyes on your item to figure out, what type of search terms are appropriate to your item. If somebody searches like Christmas sweater and I've somehow used the term Christmas in there, like this would be a great Christmas gift, but it's not actually a Christmas sweater. So people type Christmas sweater and they see my item, but nobody's clicking on it because it's not a fucking Christmas sweater. Etsy uses that kind of information to kind of determine, okay, like this is not a good piece for that search term, et cetera, right? There's a whole lot of shit. So they recommend a 90-day kind of period for that to happen. However, Star Glamour's channel typically talks about Etsy SEO for handmade stuff, and vintage is very different. Handmade is typically repeatable to some degree. I mean, there are people definitely who do handmade things that are one of a kind and that's it. But a lot of these other things, it's if somebody buys it today, the item is not just then gone forever. They renew that same listing. And so the more that listing sells, the higher it ranks in search as well. So it's a little different for vintage, but I've still been using that kind of 90-day thing in my head as like, okay, that's a good amount of time for the algorithm to kind of figure out where my item sits in search. And then Etsy's expiration of 4 months, 120 days, it just kind of makes sense. It's like a natural stopping point for me to delist it and then list it again somewhere else. All right, I feel like I've talked about this topic way too long. I'm dreading this whole Etsy mass expiration thing that's coming up. I don't want to pay 20-cent renewal fees sooner than I have to, but also I don't want to have to deal with, 200 and 300 items expiring each day on those 2 days. It's going to be so awful. So I'm trying to do like 5 per day to get a little bit ahead of it. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Another super fun topic. I came across a couple of Facebook posts, both related to Whatnot, and I wanted to talk about them because I thought that there were some really good points to address in these. Now, I don't put them up on the screen because, oh, that's so loud, because A, that's technology. When I do those videos where I can do like my screen sharing, it takes up so much memory on my computer, and I make it happen like it's fine. Also, anyway, it's a big mess. So it's easier to just film on my phone and then talk to you. So one of these messages, also, I don't want to like, disclose people's names and stuff. I don't think that's cool, even though they posted publicly on Facebook, but whatever. So somebody noted on here in a whatnot group that they're really discouraged because they had been on whatnot for a while, but then took a break for a little bit. And then upon coming back, they haven't been able to like get their footing again and get sales. So they said the issue they're facing is that if they start a bid at a high enough amount where they know that they're going to be able to make a profit, they don't get any bids. Nobody wants to buy the items. But if they started at like $1, right? And those are the examples she gives, like $14 for profit, $1 for no profit. If she starts it at $1, like people are bidding on it, but it's selling at a price that's so low that she's losing money. And she said, I think she sells makeup, right? She said that she was selling a makeup palette that retails for $40 and it sold for $1. And she said that she feels like this is nuts and that the buyers are taking advantage of her. And I'm saying her, I don't know if it was a, man or woman or whatever. I don't know this person. Okay. They said that it's insane. They feel like people are taking advantage. They'll get like 10 or 14 people in a show. Sometimes it goes up to 23. And she said it got to the point that some of the people were commenting me, telling me to end the show because they felt like I was being robbed. That's how bad it was. Now, here's the thing with this, right? And this applies to any platform that you're going to sell on, but especially to whatnot. You have to set your pricing. Okay, before I even say this, I'm going to acknowledge that this is like a no fucking shit kind of thing, but apparently it's not, right? You have to set your pricing at an amount that allows you to make a profit. You cannot rely on, especially on whatnot, you can't rely on people bidding it up to be able to give you that profit margin. That's a thing that definitely can happen, but in my experience in watching whatnot shows, and of course, like I have whatnot shows, but I personally haven't played around with this too much. In watching shows, the people who are successfully able to do $1 starts are people who have so many buyers in their shows that thing is never going to fucking sell for $1 anyway. So, it's not really like they're starting the item at $1. Like technically they are, but it's going to get shot through the roof, right? I was watching a show the other day that she had amazing vintage pieces. I don't remember the name of the seller on whatnot. I would tell you, I want to say maybe Time to Waste Vintage, but I'm not positive. But they had really amazing pieces, like these really groovy, like 60s, 70s flower power kind of things. And they weren't starting their stuff crazy low. They were starting some things at like $12, $15. There was a couple of fantastic pieces that she's like, oh, we have to start kind of high on this. And then they'd started at like $48. And I was like, actually, for what you're selling, that's very low for that thing. But they had like 55 people in the room. And those things were getting bid up. There's one thing she started at like $48, got bid up to fucking $200. And it was worth it. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a piece that was worth it. But I would not have been able to do that in one of my shows as consistently as she was doing it in her show. Part of it was that they had really knockout pieces. I think that was a big element. But also, I think even with those knockout pieces, if they didn't already have enough of a following and enough people who were familiar with them, they wouldn't have been able to bring that many people into the room, So them starting something at $12 and $15, their things were getting bid up to like $50, $80, $125. They were doing really well. But if you, as this person says, she's saying that she gets whatever, 10 to 14 people in a show, now you're going to start this item at $1. Not only do you have to have enough people in the show to bid it up, but those people have to want that specific thing. It gets dicey. And so I understand the frustration of like, if you start this thing at $14 and nobody bids on it, right? That's frustrating. But in my opinion, that's better than starting it at $1 and somebody bids on it and wins it for $1 and now you've lost money. At least when you try to start it and don't sell it, you can still sell it again at some other point in time or on another platform, you know? And so I see this a lot with Whatnot, where people get frustrated with the buyers for not bidding things up. It's like, you set your starting price, right? So if I'm a buyer, I'm in your show, and you start something at $1, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, I would like that thing, even if I'm willing to pay more than $1, right? I'm not going to just bid against myself for no fucking reason, just to be kind to you. You're the one who set that dollar price. I don't know what your pricing is based on. I don't know how much you're paying for these items. I don't know if this is a thing that you've had sitting around for 2 years and you fucking hate it and just want it out of your house. I have no idea, right? So unless there's somebody else who also wants this thing and we are both willing to pay a high enough price for it, you're not going to get it to get bid up. You can't just say like, oh, you guys aren't bidding enough and be mad at the buyer for that. That's ridiculous. And I see this kind of commentary a lot. And I'm saying this based on stuff that I see on Facebook, right? Which I will reiterate again, as I often feel like I have to, the women's vintage clothing community on Whatnot, which is the only one I'm really familiar with. I don't see this kind of shit happening. You know, I don't see this type of commentary. I follow a lot of Whatnot sellers on Instagram and things like that. They don't talk about this kind of stuff. I've never heard about this as an issue within our little community. And I've seen people start shows all over the place. $1, $3 starts, $5 starts, $15, $40. You know, one of the sellers that I go into frequently when I'm rating into another show is Sweet Dahlia Vintage. And that's somebody that, you know, I know her personally. And she always has fantastic pieces. And she, you know, definitely has some lower dollar starts, like, you know, $12, $15, sometimes even $8, $6. But she also pretty regularly is able to start things around like $40, $70, depending on what the item is, because she has a larger following. She goes live more frequently. She has a bigger social media following in general. She has like a bajillion square foot warehouse that she works out of, you know, so she's got a large following. So she gets more viewers in her shows and she can support starting things higher and still getting them bid up. She doesn't even have to start at $1, you know? So a second posting that I saw on Whatnot that was kind of on Whatnot, a second posting that I saw on Facebook that was about Whatnot was also kind of related to this. It was a person who had done a show. A buyer had come in and purchased like 4 items from them. She said, let me see. They started asking me to run some of the best pieces that I had in my show. I had priced them really low, and I probably, you know, she's saying she priced the pieces low and probably should have waited till she had a larger audience in the show before she ran the items. But this person came in, asked her to run the items, and she ran them even though she didn't have that many people in the room. She said, of course, they snatched them up immediately at a very low price. And then she said, about an hour after my show ended, the buyer messaged me and asked me to refund them for everything that they bought, except, she said for everything they bought the second time. I guess this person's done this before. The person has, you know, some other point in time came back after the fact and said, hey, can you cancel my whole order? Right? So she was asking to cancel again, but this time the buyer wanted the seller to cancel the order. And on Whatnot, like as a seller, that looks bad for us. So if I cancel an order on Whatnot, the presumption Whatnot is making is that I've fucked something up and now I can't fulfill my order. And so it's like bad for me to cancel an order. And of course, if I do this every once in a blue moon, it's not going to really hurt you. But if it's something you do consistently, it can cause a problem. But same thing from a buyer's perspective. If you're a buyer and you frequently are canceling orders, that looks bad on your account, and Whatnot will eventually kind of take some kind of action against you, either suspending you for a period or eventually canceling your account if you do this very consistently. So this person wanted the seller to cancel the order. She said, let me see, you know, and she was just asking for advice. Should I just cancel this on my end and be done with it? Or should I contact Whatnot and whatever? And so all sorts of people were giving advice, but one of the reasons I wanted to look at this also was because of the way the seller responded to the buyer. The buyer said, please refund me on these 4 items. I wanted to get more, but you didn't have more pieces. Your shipping is very expensive for just a little bit of clothing. It was like kids' clothes. So the seller responded, sure, no problem. I'm sorry I didn't have as much as you were expecting. I'm still pretty new to selling and I'm working diligently on growing my inventory. And then she asked the buyer to submit the cancellation on the buyer's end, to which the buyer said, no, thank you, please refund. So the buyer number 1 on crack, you better submit your own cancellation. And people gave her all sorts of advice on that. But the thing that really sort of irked me on behalf of the seller here was the fact that the seller apologized for not having as much inventory as the buyer was expecting. And I feel like this is a thing for new sellers, people who are new to selling in general, right? They frequently, I think, don't have the sense of confidence that comes with like more experience in selling, which makes sense. But I see them a lot apologizing, feeling like they have to either apologize for or justify their pricing. Here she's apologizing for not having enough inventory. The buyer purchased 4 items from you without knowing whether or not you had more inventory. Like that's not the way that Whatnot works. You don't purchase an item and you're only bound to that purchase if the seller has enough other stuff that you also want to buy. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that's crazy. Also, telling the seller that her shipping was too high, like the seller doesn't set the shipping prices. Now, could she have input incorrect weights or estimated the weights incorrectly? Yes. But, it was really making me sad for the seller that she felt the need to apologize for not having enough inventory. And, one of the things that I do as a seller, if I'm feeling weird about my pricing sometimes or anything like that, I look at my item and think like, okay, what would XYZ retail store be charging for this? And so in my case, because I'm selling vintage pieces, especially, mostly what I do is I think about anthropology because there's like copying vintage stuff. And if this dress was an Anthropologie, what would Anthropologie be charging for this dress? Right? And the truth of the matter is Anthropologie charges crazy prices. I haven't even been in one of their stores in years, but I know that they charge insane prices, especially for the just absolutely pathetic quality of the items that they have at this point. Everything is garbage. But then I'm thinking like, oh, I don't know, like $80 seems like kind of a lot for this blouse. Maybe I should only charge like 40, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, okay, but what would this be at Anthropologie would be charging $120 for this blouse. I'm fine at 80. Let's just do that, So if you have a hard time if you're a newer seller and you have a hard time with pricing, you have a hard time with any of this kind of stuff, you don't owe your customers explanations for things. You do not have to explain to them why you're pricing something the way that you're pricing it. You do not have to explain your shipping pricing. You do not have to explain the amount of inventory that you have, because let's face it, if you don't have enough inventory, it's probably just because you've decided not to do this to yourself, right? You don't need to apologize for that. If you wanted to take these fucking suspenders, if I wanted to put these suspenders up and charge $300 for them, that's my fucking business. Will somebody buy them? Probably not. Maybe if I don't know. But, probably no. But that also doesn't mean that somebody gets to come into my messages and say, oh, your pricing on these suspenders is ridiculous. And okay, don't buy them. And obviously I would not reply to a buyer that way. But, I don't owe my buyers an explanation for my pricing, my shipping, etc. Now, there may be times that I feel like it will help us both for me to explain that, right? I've had international buyers go like, oh, I really like this item, but the shipping is insane. And it's like, oh, yeah, because you're in Australia and the shipping, legitimately, it's going to cost me $25 to put this in the mail for you. Yeah, like things like that. I understand that. I said the other day that Etsy, it was like a $40 shipping charge to ship to Australia, whereas I could do it in pirate ship for like 25. But like, if somebody says to me, this shipping charge is insane, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? The shipping is really expensive. That's just what it is through the postal service. And I don't have any control over that. And I understand if that means that you are going to choose not to purchase this item, right? Or I might be able to say, yeah, you're right. The shipping is really expensive. Let me see if there's a less expensive option. I may choose to do those things, but I don't have to say, like, oh yeah, I'm really sorry. Like, I have to pay for my packaging and my gas to the post office, and then I have to pay for the box, and I pay for the, like, you don't have to go into all of that stuff, right? And honestly, because the customer does not care usually. If you have something to say that will help the customer, like, actually understand, something, like, again, yes, international shipping, prohibitively expensive. I'm so sorry, but you don't have to, like, justify things to them. And I feel like a lot of customers, like, this person gets caught up and she feels like she's done something wrong because the buyer's coming out and saying, hey, I want you to cancel my order because you didn't have enough stuff for me to choose from. Okay, well then, that, like, I don't know. I'm glad that she reached out to people on Facebook to get some advice on this. I wish she had done it before she replied to the buyer, because see, now that, the buyer says, please refund me, I wanted to get more, but you didn't have it, and your shipping is very expensive. So now she's saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't have as much as you were expecting. I'm new to selling, blah, 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 blah. She's giving this buyer a foothold to kind of dig in and say, yeah, you need to just refund me, and you need to just do this. And, because the buyer knows that the seller feels bad. And I don't like talking shit about buyers, although I've done a lot of that in this video. Sorry. But, like, in this instance, this buyer is not communicating with the seller in good faith. Do you know what I mean? Like, this person is either purposely trying to take advantage of this seller, or they are just not really considering the seller. They regret having purchased these 4 items. They had second thoughts about it, and now they're like, yeah, never mind. Then you probably shouldn't be, I don't know. Yeah, like, I want to say you shouldn't be, impulse bidding on whatnot. That's just kind of, I don't know, whatever. But I wish that the seller hadn't responded in a way that was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't have enough inventory for you. Like, I feel like that's kind of a hurdle that a lot of sellers have to get over. I remember early on in my reselling, having a lot of difficulty with pricing also. And some of the stuff was just so ridiculously cheap. When I look back at some of the prices, oh my God, I was selling things so cheap. I would find, like, a twin sheet, right? Like a vintage sheet. Because I did way more, like, home goods and hard goods and stuff back in the day. And I would pay $2 or $3 for this sheet. And then I would sell it for $15, including shipping, which shipping was way less expensive. It was probably like $3 to $4 for the shipping at the time. But, so it's selling for $15 shipped. And I was like, this is amazing. I bought it for $3. I sold it for $15. I made $10. You know what I mean? Like, and the amount of work I was putting in for that, it's almost adorable that I was that excited about it. But also, there were times where I felt like, oh, I hope somebody's not going to think that $20 for this sheet is too high. And, and it was also comparing myself to other sellers and things like that. And there were definitely a lot of people who were selling at the similar types of price points to me. And the sellers that were selling at higher price points, just, a lot of it was they seemed so much more professional and polished and knowledgeable. And it's probably true to some degree, right? They just had a lot more experience under their belts. So I think that we all go through this kind of phase of charging too low and feeling like we have to explain our pricing and things like that. Because half the time too, we're pulling these prices out of our ass, and there's also the, like, oh, well, you bought this for $2 at a thrift store. How are you going to charge me $40 for it? It's like, I'm going to charge $40 because I have it, and that's what I'm asking for this item. And if you would like to get it, you can either buy it from me for $40 or you can find it somewhere else, and that's not to say that in a mean way. That's just the way it is, and I can, whatever, this is a whole, like, pricing thing, and I'm going off on a tangent now, but, it takes time to learn not to feel bad about these things if you're the kind of person who is prone to feeling badly about these things or feeling insecure about these things. But I realized today that I have been doing reselling full time for, it's about 9 years now that I've been doing it full time. And it was sort of an accidental thing. I had lost a job. And while I was in between jobs, I had already been doing reselling as like a little funsy hobby. And so while I was looking for a new job, I was, of course, still doing my little funsy hobby. And then at a certain point, months had gone by, and I was like, maybe I can just do this. And I can't believe it's been that long, but I definitely see the difference in myself in the confidence with which I handle all of these, these aspects of my business and communications with my buyers. And, when I posted on Instagram today about this return in a clear plastic bag, and people were outraged on my behalf, which made me feel warm and fuzzy, but then also made me feel bad because now I feel like I'm just being mean, but also don't do this. Okay. Horrible. Anyway. But somebody had made a comment like, oh, they're lucky that you take returns in the first place. And, I like, that's kind of a thing for me. It took me a long time to get to a point where I not only took returns, but like took returns and feel fine about it, and so that was also a big learning curve. So anyway, that's just my little reselling rant for today. I think that was my only Facebook stuff. Poor seller. Yeah, that's it. You can see I've got this entire mess behind me. This is all whatnot related mess. This is all mostly, okay, that's not all whatnot related, but the mess is because of whatnot. These are just clean socks that I need to put away. This is the return that came back. This is a jacket that I have to put away. This is a jacket that I thought I took photos of, and I wrote up a whole draft and was ready to put the jacket away and realized I didn't take photos of it. So anyway, but all this, I've got all this giant whatnot mess around me because I'm prepping for like 3 shows all at the same time, and it's a lot. But I did take time out of it to do this little video for you where I ranted endlessly about a lot of things in my bare face. So you're welcome. This is the other ugly truth of reselling. This is what I look like most of the time. I do usually put makeup on every day just for myself. But I'm usually not wearing cute stuff. I'm just wearing this like t-shirt. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Probably did not. I don't see how you could have. I appreciate you watching the whole thing if you got this far. And I will see you again on Wednesday for my regularly scheduled haul video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.